Here's what's coming up on The World Today. The Taliban gives its first press conference since taking control of Afghanistan on Sunday, promising amnesty, security and safety of foreigners in the country. Meanwhile, countries continue to evacuate their citizens and other Afghan locals willing to flee. Plus, more trouble for Haiti as tropical storm Grace sweeps through Les Cayes days after a powerful earthquake hit, killing more than 1,400 people. A warm welcome to the program today. I'm Teniola Shoboale in Lagos, Nigeria. We begin with the Taliban's first press conference, which ended just an hour ago in Kandahar. Taliban spokesman Zubalai Mujahidi assured the international community that Afghanistan's soil will not be used against anybody, indicating Afghanistan will not be hosting foreign forces. He also urged people to stop leaving the country as there is full security across the country. He said nobody will be able to kidnap anybody. Well, we're going to have more and more security day by day. He also talked about an amnesty, but refused to give details on women's role in the workforce.
2 days after completing their takeover of Afghanistan, Taliban militants give their first press conference. A spokesperson for the group says they want to make sure the country is no longer a battlefield of conflict. They've also declared amnesty across the country, promising not to harass ethnic groups and urging women to join the government.
We are assuring the safety of all those who have worked with the United States and allied forces, whether as interpreters or any other field that they have worked with them. As for their talents and their skills, we do not want them to leave the country. We want them to serve their own homeland. As for the contractor that was perhaps, he's gone missing, as reported by the media, we do not have any information about him at the moment. Women will be afforded all their rights, whether it is in work or other activities, because women are a key part of society. And we are guaranteeing all their rights within the limits of Islam.
Earlier, a prominent local news station also had a female anchor interview a Taliban official live on air, signaling a push by the Taliban to project a more moderate image to the international community. Meanwhile, Mullah Barada, the chief of the Taliban's political office, has arrived in Afghanistan's Kandahar province along with a delegation. However, despite the latest developments, Afghanistan's deposed vice president, Amrullah Saleh, has claimed to be the country's new caretaker president following the flight of former leader Ashraf Ghani into exile on Sunday. He says he's still in the country and that he's reaching out to all leaders to secure their support and consensus. Meanwhile, military flights evacuating international diplomats and civilians from Afghanistan have restarted after the runway at Kabul airport was cleared of thousands desperate to flee on Monday. At least 7 people died in the chaos, including several people who clung to the sides of a jet as it took off. As evacuation flights resume, foreign powers are also assessing how to respond to the new rulers in Kabul and also how to deal with refugees trying to flee the country.
In the last 2 decades, there have been no terrorist attack on Allied soil organized from Afghanistan. Those now taking power have the responsibility to ensure that international terrorists do not regain a foothold. Allies have the capabilities and the vigilance to address future terrorist threats from Afghanistan. But what we have seen in the last few weeks was a military and political collapse at a speed which had not been anticipated. Parts of the Afghan security forces fought bravely, but they were unable to secure the country, because ultimately the Afghan political leadership failed to stand up to the Taliban and to achieve the peaceful solution that Afghans desperately wanted. This failure of Afghan leadership led to the tragedy we are witnessing today.
U.S. forces are due to complete their withdrawal by the end of this month under the deal with the Taliban that hinged on their promise not to let Afghanistan be used for international terrorism. Several countries, including Britain, have voiced concern that the vacuum left by the West's withdrawal will allow militants from Al-Qaeda and Islamic State to gain a foothold in Afghanistan, just 20 years after the September 11, 2001 attacks on the United States.
While at it, one must take into account Afghanistan's unique.
In the meantime, up to 600 members of the Afghan security forces are said to be helping to provide security at the Kabul airport, the scene of chaotic evacuation efforts in the country. According to U.S. Army Major General William Taylor, with the American military's joint staff, there will be more than 4,000 U.S. troops at the airport by the end of the day, and there's not been any hostile interactions with the Taliban so far.
Yesterday, the U.S. military footprint in Afghanistan started at about roughly 2,500. And by the end of today, there will be more than approximately 4,000 troops on the ground in Kabul. Forces will continue to flow in and reinforce the State Department and DoD effort there. The operation is ongoing, and I'd like to give you a few more details on that operation. HKIA remains secure. It is currently open for military flight operations as well as limited commercial flight operations. Throughout the night, 9 C-17s arrived, delivering equipment and approximately 1,000 troops. Additionally, 7 C-17s departed. These flights lifted approximately 700 to 800 passengers, and we can confirm 165 of these passengers are American citizens. The rest are a mix of SIV applicants, third country nationals.
Well, President Joe Biden has defended his decision to withdraw U.S. troops from Afghanistan, telling Americans he will not be passing the Afghan war to another president. We heard him in his address to the nation last night, taking responsibility for the action, adding that it was unforeseeable things would deteriorate so rapidly. He blamed the Afghan government and forces for not building a proper governance structure and the Afghan forces for being unprepared against the Taliban.
I stand squarely behind my decision. After 20 years, I've learned the hard way that there was never a good time to withdraw U.S. forces. That's why we're still there. We were clear-eyed about the risks. We planned for every contingency, but I always promised the American people that I would be straight with you. The truth is, this did unfold more quickly than we had anticipated. So what's happened? Afghanistan political leaders gave up and fled the country. The Afghan military collapsed, sometime without trying to fight. If anything, the developments of the past week reinforced that ending U.S. military involvement in Afghanistan now was the right decision. American troops cannot and should not be fighting in a war and dying in a war that Afghan forces are not willing to fight for themselves. Something the Taliban doesn't have. Taliban does not have an air force, or we don't have permanent military presence.
One person who has borne the brunt of the Taliban's wrath is Nobel Peace Prize winner Malala when she was shot in the face on a bus in Pakistan back in 2009 at the age of 12. She has called out President Biden's address, saying the president has a lot to do and must take a bold step to protect the Afghan people. Channels TV's Washington correspondent Maria Bird joins us now for more on this. Maria, a lot has happened. I know President Biden spoke last night about the box stopping at his table and how the timing of the withdrawal of U.S. troops would not have made a difference in Afghanistan. But how are Americans reacting to this?
You're exactly correct. I think yesterday's address was one that took many Americans by surprise, to be very honest. I think you have Americans that are obviously in support of the Afghan people and have been for 20 years now. And then you have those Americans who, quite honest, are concerned about the future of the U.S. as it relates to terrorism. We know that with the COVID-19 virus and the Delta variant, there's been a lot of talks around potential terrorist attacks and being aware of that as the American people. And so I think that is another side of the coin that people are concerned about, is that with the U.S. taking a very hard stand on this and removing itself so quickly from Afghanistan, that this could potentially lead to, leaving the country open for potential terrorist attacks. And so those are the two areas of concern that many Americans are approaching right now. And it will only be time will tell to see what will actually be the outcome once the U.S. has fully removed itself from Afghanistan.
Since then, the administration has focused on evacuations, but there are some who blame the administration for the messy process, basically. Has anyone in the administration acknowledged this?
Well, we have heard from Homeland Security in regards to this. We have heard from the State Department, and there have been very clear communications from them. We've also heard from the Department of Defense. The military has spoken out about this. But I think the biggest question is that the administration has teetered around this concern is those Afghan people who have been supporting the U.S. for almost 20 years now, as they've served as interpreters, or they've served as supportive intel to the U.S. military. And so what is happening to those individuals? We know that many of them have received special visas to come to the United States, but there are many others that are still in Afghanistan and have not been any leeway to see that they will eventually make it here.
So right now, with the Taliban in charge, does the Biden administration have any plans relating with the Taliban?
Right now, the Biden administration does not have any clear indications. All we have is what we've obviously heard from the Taliban, which is they're giving amnesty. They are not foreseeing any type of, conflict with the U.S. at this time. We also know that many embassies aside from the U.S. are temporarily closing down because there's not a lot of details from the Taliban as to what will really happen once they take full control, which we know that has happened very quickly. So at this time, I think it's going to be once the U.S. has removed its personnel, then we will see what will actually come of this, because there will probably be humanitarian efforts which will begin. And so I would not be surprised if in the coming weeks we don't see some sort of a, not reversal of action, but some sort of new actions being taken place to support the Afghan people.
And, speaking of the humanitarian action, the UN has warned that the country is on a brink of humanitarian catastrophe. And President Biden said last night that he was adamant that he wouldn't pass the Afghan war to a fifth U.S. president. Amid criticism, how have former U.S. presidents reacted, to the latest developments and the escalation of the conflict in Afghanistan?
Well, I think many of them took it with a grain of salt, to be very honest. We all know that he was vice president for President Obama, which was one of the presidents that inherited the Afghanistan war with the U.S. And so I think that they are not focusing on that as much. I don't expect to hear anyone to come out and say anything against what he said yesterday evening. It's really going to be, I think, at this time, how do we safely remove the military and how do we make the best decisions moving forward? And I think that's what you will probably hear many former presidents, if they at all speak on it, they will be counseling the president on how to make the best decisions moving forward.
And then, Maria, a lot to keep our eyes on. Thanks for bringing us up to speed.
Thank you for having me.
Still to come on the program. Well-preserved skeleton sheds light on culture in ancient Pompeii. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. We're still looking at the impact and reactions to the conflict in Afghanistan. While Afghans who fled their homeland 20 years ago have watched in shock as images from news channels and social media showed the Taliban's return to the country. Many of those who had fled the Taliban the first time round, including Darius Insimi, who entered the UK in a refrigerated truck with his family when he was just 6 years old. His father set up the Afghanistan and Central Asian Association to help Afghans integrate into British life. He said his organization was receiving between 30 and 50 inquiries a day from those who are now trying to leave Afghanistan and come to Britain.
I'm in shock, to be honest with you. Since yesterday, I don't even know how to express my feelings anymore. It's just very shocking, very upsetting.
Very sad, very sad. Sometimes I found myself in a complete terrifying situation. I am by myself feeling really lonely, and the pain, anxiety, you know.
Now when you look at the situation and the fact that the whole world has, in a sense, forgotten about Afghanistan, left Afghanistan on its own, the Afghan government doesn't have the capability to ensure peace and stability, and on the other hand, NATO has also pulled out their troops. I think it's a very, very difficult, very shocking situation, and I hope that the international community changes their approach. I urge the UK government to change their policy towards staying in Afghanistan.
To other stories now, Tropical Storm Grace has bucketed down on quake-ravaged Haiti shortly after thousands were left homeless by the tragedy. Heavy rain fell over Les Cayes, the southern coastal city that bore the brunt of the 7.2 magnitude quake. The quake brought down tens of thousands of buildings in the poorest country in the Americas, which is still recovering from a tremor 11 years ago that killed over 200,000 people, and flooding caused by the storm has complicated rescue efforts. Well, the latest disaster to hit Haiti comes as the country continues its three-day mourning for quake victims after officials announced that 1,419 people were killed in the tragedy. Saturday's 7.2 magnitude quake brought down tens of thousands of buildings in the deeply impoverished country, which is still recovering from another major earthquake 11 years ago and the assassination of its president, Jovenel Moïse, last month. Dozens of churches, hotels, homes, and schools were seriously damaged or ruined by the quake. Haitian authorities said on Monday afternoon that 1,419 fatalities had been confirmed, with some 6,900 people injured and over 37,000 houses destroyed. Well, joining us now is co-founder and executive director of the Asian Bridge Alliance, Gerlin Joseph. Gerlin, thank you so much for your time on the program. I know you have family and friends in Haiti. What are they telling you as regards the situation on ground presently?
Good morning, afternoon. Thank you so much for having me. My apologies. I am on the road right now, trying to get support for the people on the ground. We've been in communications constantly, and we have staff members who are from Les Cayes and Jeremy who have been able to give us updates, and we are in direct contact as well with people on the ground. The majority of the people we talk to have lost everything. One of the people that we talked to, unfortunately, were 5 of them in the house. He was the only one who survived. His sister and her husband and her 2 children, unfortunately, did not make it. The house completely collapsed. it's chaos. It is chaos, and right now we are seeing a lot of search and rescue, which is what we are asking of everyone, to prioritize search and rescue to make sure that we can find as many people alive as possible. On top of the earthquake, the storm started as well. Heavy rain has been ravaging all around the south, including Jacmel, Jérémie, Akin, Petit Trou de Nip, where the epicenter of the earthquake unfortunately happened. I know I look extremely tired right now. It's been one emergency after another. As you mentioned, we are still trying to recover from the 2010 earthquake, dealing with the assassination of the president, dealing with a lot of violence, a lot of kidnapping continues to happen on the ground, and on top of it, we are dealing with the earthquake and the storm. So we continue to monitor, and we will be starting to provide assistance to the people, the most impacted community members. What we at the Haitian Bridge Alliance are doing is communicating directly with individual families, so we make sure that we take care of each family as they need, specifically for them to support, to bury their loved ones, to find shelter, to find food, to be able to go to the doctor, to hospitals. These are our priorities at the moment.
Yeah, it's a very sad situation, and Haiti needs every help it can get at the moment. Is Haiti receiving help from other nations and international bodies as well? We know, like you said, the United States is providing some aid, but what about other countries so far?
From what we are hearing from people on the ground, we are having a lot of health assistance from Cuba. We're the first country to send doctors and medical professionals to support on the ground. We had news that I believe other countries are also sending some support. We know for a fact that the United States sent some support. What we asked was specifically search and rescue, as I mentioned before, but we are keeping an eye because we also understand that when we are dealing with those natural disasters, there needs to be accountability, there needs to be transparency. So accountability and transparency so that history does not repeat itself, so that what happened with the AIDS in 2010 does not happen again. So that is why we are being very careful as to where we direct people to make donations and how we address support for the impacted communities. But right now we are seeing some assistance from the United States. We are seeing a lot of medical support from Cuba and other countries.
Well, our thoughts and prayers are definitely with Haiti at this time. Co-founder and executive director of the Haitian Bridge Alliance, Gerlin Joseph, thank you so much for your time on the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
And finally on the program, archaeologists have uncovered a well-preserved skeleton at a burial site in Pompeii, which has shed new light on funeral rites and cultural activity in the doomed ancient Roman city. The body of the man, believed to be in his 60s, was found in a tomb which dated to the final decades of Pompeii before it was destroyed by a volcano. A commemorative inscription named the man as Marcus Venerius and made a reference to theatre performances at Pompeii in Greek, the first time archaeologists have found direct evidence of plays performed there in Greek as well as Latin. The park said in a statement that it was one of the best preserved skeletons ever found at the site and showed signs of partial mummification with air and an air still evident on the skull. 2 cremation urns were also found in the tomb enclosure. Adults were normally cremated in the city at the time, so the burial of Marcus is seen as highly unusual. And that's the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Teniola Shoboale. Bye for now.